It's going to have to require perhaps more precise surgical strikes inside Yemeni territory to deter the Houthis, destroy their infrastructure, repel them somewhat. The Houthis have come to the ascendancy in this whole Middle East crisis. They have been able to successfully disrupt the shipping lane in the Red Sea by carrying out a barrage of operations, either by launching missile strikes or even hijacking vessels. They've been filming it for propaganda purposes, and they have caused a massive amount of disruption. If you think about it, that in the past, when various cargo vessels were using the Suez Canal to connect Asia to Europe, it would take often, on average, between 19 to 25 days. Now they're having to go around the Cape of Good Hope near South Africa, and that is taking between 31 to 34 days. And as they say, time is money. So the Houthis are actually creating a lot of disruption to the global supply chains and the global economy.
John Kirby said in his briefing that we're not going to telegraph every move that we make to our opponents, as it were, but that's exactly what they've done. And one wonders how the Houthis will have responded in the interim.
Well, the Houthis are a very well-prepared militia group. As you mentioned earlier, that they are supported by Iran. And remember that this is one of the entities of amongst many different factions in Yemen. They withstood a Saudi-led war from 2015 all the way to 2023. And despite all the bombing that the Saudis and allied partners did, the Houthis were able to resist. They portrayed that as a victory. They framed it as a successful resistance, and they will no doubt do the same. They are churning out a lot of propaganda. My concern, though, is that what will this escalation result in? Because, as I mentioned, the Houthis are not the only entity in Yemen. There are other entities, like, for example, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, who will be all too happy to draw in British and American troops and maybe take advantage of that by launching their own type of operation. So we have to be really careful not to get drawn into this beyond the point of then it creating further consequences.
But nobody's talking about boots on the ground at this stage, are they? I mean, surely they're talking about strikes from drones or from ships or from the air.
Well, that is currently what is already actually going on. You find that British naval, American naval, as well as partner nations such as India, Australia, have been actively involved in the Indian Ocean region to try and provide safe routes for the cargo vessels. But here's the thing, is that it's going to have to require perhaps more precise surgical strikes inside Yemeni territory to deter the Houthis, destroy their infrastructure, repel them somewhat. And once you go further, and even if it's by the air, it means that other entities will want to exploit it. So that's the concern, is that no one is, of course, talking about boots on the ground, but it does quickly escalate, and we have to be careful that it is managed beyond the point of no return.
Right. I see the Telegraph quoting Rishi Sunak telling the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi that the UK would continue to take action to defend freedom of navigation and protect lives at sea. When you look at that neighbourhood, it's a pretty troubled one. What do you think the attitude of, say, the Egyptians and others will be?
Well, Egypt is suffering terribly because it depends on the Suez Canal. It gets a huge amount of revenue from that. And when you see that the shipping lanes are now actually going almost quiet, whereas others are now preferring the Cape of Good Hope as an alternative, it hurts the Egyptian economy. Egypt's economy itself is already going through a major economic crisis, a recession. There have been protests in Egypt against the president, and that is before all of this had kicked off. So Egypt is feeling this quite substantially. And again, it shows that Iran, through its proxies, whether it is the Houthis in Yemen or Hezbollah in Lebanon, they are able to exert their own agenda here. And you can see that this is no longer just about Israel and Hamas. This is now about many different entities that are conflating their own agenda, seeking to take advantage of it, and trying to create political, economic, and social repercussions within the Middle East.
How do you think this particular episode ends?
Unfortunately, I think it's only going to get a lot more problematic before it can actually be rolled back. The Houthis are claiming that they will continue to target the shipping lanes and the cargo vessels until Israel withdraws from the Gaza Strip. And it doesn't look like that Israel is doing that anytime soon. So it is going to require a de-escalation. Where a country that's really important here that we haven't spoken about is China.
Right.
China was responsible for bringing Saudi Arabia and Iran to the negotiating table last year. It was a very major effort of Chinese diplomacy. China is also being hurt by the Houthi attacks on the shipping fleet. So they need to get involved. They need to put pressure on Iran to contain the Houthis themselves, because it actually hurts China as well. So it's in their interest to work with the US, with the UK and other countries to try and find a solution to this.
Who is seen as an honest broker in all this? I mean, when it came to Israel and Gaza, it was Qatar, of course, that stepped up, and to a degree the Egyptians. But when it comes to this, it's a lot more intricate, isn't it?
Yes, I don't think there's any clear-cut nation that is going to want to, in fact, even get involved, because they're getting caught in the middle of two separate beliefs, two separate agendas in the region that at the moment don't see any commonality. Iran has made it very clear where it stands in support of Hamas, and it's enabled its militias, as we've been discussing. Also, think about the fact that we've seen the Shia militia groups in Syria and in Iraq carrying out further attacks on U.S. Military installations. So it's all part of a wider picture here. And I think if you look at it, it's interesting how you see two different narratives or several narratives coming across. There is the Hamas one, which is showing itself in its operations in the Gaza Strip against Israel. Then you have groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS also trying to take advantage of the chaos by trying to further their own propaganda, their own agenda. And then you have the Iran angle as well. None of these are necessarily always interconnected, but they are certainly benefiting from this terrible crisis that has emerged from the Middle East ever since the Hamas operation of October 7th, 2023.